Tom floated in the black emptiness of space. His small cargo ship had been torn apart by a sudden blast, and now only broken pieces drifted around him. The only sound he could hear was his own slow breathing inside the thin walls of his damaged spacesuit. He could see distant stars, tiny and cold, shining far away, somewhere deep in his mind. He knew that without rescue, the cold would take him soon. He tried to move his hands, but the oxygen pack on his back felt heavier than ever. The air was running low. His ship's emergency beacon had been destroyed in the attack, and no human patrol ships were anywhere near this part of the galaxy. Just when he thought it was over, a massive shadow passed over him. The light from the stars disappeared for a moment. Tom turned his head and saw the source, an enormous alien cruiser, shaped like a long spear with jagged wings stretching out on each side. The metal hull glowed with strange blue patterns, alive with shifting light. It was not human. The ship slowed, and a hatch opened underneath it. A beam of pale green light spread across the space around Tom. He felt a sudden pull, as if invisible. Hands were dragging him upward. The stars around him began to move, tilting as the alien ship swallowed him into its open bay. Inside the bay, tall figures in dark armor moved toward him. Their bodies were thin, their skin a pale gray, and their eyes like deep black stones. They spoke to each other in quick, sharp sounds that Tom could not understand. One of them stepped forward, touched the side of Tom's helmet, and twisted a latch. His helmet unlocked, and fresh air thicker and colder than he was used to filled his lungs. The aliens did not seem impressed to see him. They looked at him as one might look at a strange insect. One of them tapped a small screen on his wrist, and a soft voice came from it, speaking in a broken version of the human language. "You are from Earth?" The voice said slowly. "Yes," Tom answered, his voice low. The alien tilted its head. "Human, prisoner." Without another word, they took away his helmet and oxygen pack. Two of them held him firmly by the arms and led him across the bay toward a long corridor. The walls were covered with alien markings, glowing faintly as they walked past. The air smelled faintly of metal and something sweet, almost like a flower. They stopped at a heavy door, which slid open with a low hum. Inside was a small cell with a single bench, and dim light set into the ceiling. They pushed Tom inside. The door closed with a soft hiss, and he was alone. For a while, Tom sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the ship's engines. He studied the walls. The metal was smooth but warm to the touch. He noticed tiny holes near the floor that might be for air circulation, somewhere beyond the wall. He could hear the muffled voices of the aliens, though their words meant nothing to him. Time passed slowly. Tom did not know if it was hours or days. The only change came when a panel in the wall opened, and a tray of food slid inside. It was a flat, pale bread with a small dish of thick blue paste. It smelled strange, but hunger forced him to eat. The taste was bitter, yet it gave him strength. One day, or perhaps one ship night, he heard footsteps outside his cell. The door opened, and two guards entered. One held a small device that projected a moving image in the air. The image showed a massive ship, far larger than the one they were on. Its shape was more like a floating fortress than a cruiser, with huge round engines and long rows of weapon mounts. Even in the dim image, Tom could see it was ancient. The guard spoke in his language, but Tom could not follow the words. Then the guard pointed to the image and gave a short laugh. The other guard joined in. Tom understood only one thing from their laughter. They thought the ship was useless. Later, Tom heard more talk through the wall. The aliens mentioned a name again and again, something that sounded like the Sentinel. They spoke of it as if it were a relic from a forgotten age. From their tone, Tom guessed they saw it as nothing more than a trophy, a symbol of some past victory. Tom leaned back against the wall, his mind turning. He did not know why, but the name stirred something deep inside him. He remembered an old story his grandfather had told him. It was about a time long before Earth joined the wider galaxy, when humans were not yet known among the stars. In that story, there was a ship, one that would never obey anyone except its rightful human commander. Could the Sentinel be that ship? Tom forced himself to stay calm. It was too early to hope. He knew nothing about the aliens who held him, except that they had no respect for humans. They saw him as a weak animal, not worth a second thought. That could be his greatest advantage. The days, if they were days, passed. Tom began to learn a few words of their language just from listening. He caught words for food, guard, ship, and even weapon. He also noticed that the guards were not careful when speaking near him. They believed he could not understand. That was a mistake. One time, while they stood outside his cell, Tom overheard a short conversation. He caught the words for sentinel and storage world. The guards were talking about moving supplies to that place. They spoke casually, not knowing the human inside the cell was listening closely to every sound. Tom's heart began to beat faster. A plan started to form in his mind, but he would need patience. He could not rush. He had to wait for the right moment, the right chance to act. For now, he stayed quiet, sitting in the corner of his cell, pretending to be harmless. The guards no longer even looked at him when they passed. To them, he was nothing. But Tom knew something they did not. In the darkness of his cell, he whispered to himself, "If the sentinel still lives, I will find it." Tom had learned to keep his eyes half closed and his face without expression. When the alien guards passed his cell, it made them think he was tired, bored, or broken. In truth, he was always listening, always watching. Every sound, every movement, every word mattered. The alien ship moved through space at a steady pace. Tom could feel the deep vibration under his feet. Sometimes the ship shook slightly when it changed direction, and a low hum passed through the walls. The air inside was cool and heavy, and it carried the faint scent of some alien flower mixed with metal. One day, two guards stopped in front of his cell. They were speaking quickly in their own language. Tom only caught a few words: sentinel, orbit, and old. He leaned against the wall and tilted his head as if he were bored, but his mind was racing. He heard them say storage planet and patrol route. The words gave him a picture. The sentinel was somewhere out there, in orbit around a planet where few ships traveled. The guards laughed and made a gesture like brushing dust from their hands. Tom guessed they meant it was useless, a forgotten relic. That told him more than they realized. If they did not think it was dangerous, they would not watch it closely. Later, a different alien arrived carrying a small device. It projected a floating image into the air, rotating model of the sentinel. Tom looked carefully. The ship was massive, with a long central body and four giant arms that looked like they could hold huge weapons. Parts of it were broken or dark. It looked abandoned. But Tom noticed something the aliens seemed to miss. The design was not like their own ships, and not like any alien design he had seen before. It had smooth lines, strong symmetry, and what looked like human-sized access points. Tom kept his expression calm. The alien turned off the projection and walked away without a second glance. But inside, Tom felt a growing certainty. This was not just a random old warship. This was something built by, or for, humans. Over the next days, Tom listened even more carefully. He learned the alien word for unlock and for command. He heard them mention that the sentinel could not be powered up because the command key had been lost. They said it like a joke, as if it was an old myth. Tom knew better. When the ship's lights dimmed for the night cycle, Tom sat in the corner of his cell and thought about the old stories from Earth. His grandfather had once told him about the first builders, a race that had been close friends with early humans long before written history. The builders had vanished, but they had left behind wonders scattered across the stars. Some believed they had made ships that would only answer to human voices. Tom had always thought it was just a story, but now he began to believe the Sentinel might be one of those ships. One evening, while the ship was quiet, Tom heard a sound at the door. A panel slid open and a tray of food came through. This time, instead of grabbing it quickly, he crouched down and looked through the gap. He could see a sliver of the hallway and the feet of the alien who had delivered it. The alien wore a belt with tools, a scanner, a small cutting device, and something that looked like a key card. Tom pulled back quickly before he was seen. That night, Tom began to plan in detail. he would need a way to get out of the cell. He would need a disguise to move around the ship, and he would need to find a way to get onto whatever transport visited the storage planet. Where the Sentinel waited, he waited for more information. It came sooner than he expected. The next day, the technicians passed by his cell speaking in low voices. Tom caught several words: supply run, Sentinel, cycle 3. That meant in 3 ship days, a shuttle would be going there. Tom's pulse quickened. He could not miss that chance. For the next 2 days, he studied the guard rotations. He noticed that during the meal hours, the hallway outside his cell was almost empty for several minutes. Only one guard remained, usually standing near the corner. If Tom could distract or disable that guard quietly, he could slip out. He also noticed that when technicians came to check the cells, they carried tool belts and wore loose dark uniforms. If he could take one, he might be able to pass. As a low-level worker, on the second night, he got his chance. A guard came to bring food, but as he leaned down to slide the tray inside, Tom moved fast. He grabbed the guard's wrist through the gap and twisted hard, forcing the alien to drop the tray. The guard cried out and stumbled back. In that brief moment, Tom reached through, snatched the key card from the belt, and let go. The guard muttered something angry and walked away, not realizing what was missing. Tom hid the card under the bench. His hands were shaking, but he knew he was closer to freedom now. The third day came. The hallway outside was quiet during the meal hour, just as he had planned. Tom took the card and slid it into the small reader by the cell door. A green light flashed, and the door opened with a soft hiss. He stepped out into the corridor. The air felt different here, more open, filled with a low thrum of engines. He walked quickly but without running, heading toward the maintenance section he had memorized from glimpses through the cell door. There, he found what he needed: a rack of uniforms and tool belts. He put one on over his clothes and pulled the hood up. In the reflection of a dark metal wall, he looked almost like one of the technicians. He moved toward the docking bay, keeping his head down. Round the corner, he saw the shuttle, a smaller craft with smooth armor, preparing for departure. 2 technicians were loading crates inside. Tom picked up an empty container and walked toward them as if he belonged there. No one stopped him. Inside the shuttle, he set the container down and found a seat in the back. His heart was pounding, but he kept his face calm. The doors closed. The shuttle lifted off with a soft push that pressed him into the seat through the small window. He saw the alien cruiser shrinking in the distance. Ahead, stars stretched across the darkness. Somewhere among them was the storage planet and the Sentinel. Tom allowed himself a small, quiet smile. The first step of his plan was complete. The real challenge was about to begin. The shuttle moved quietly through space. Tom sat in the back corner, keeping his head low, the hood of the technician uniform shadowing his face. Round him, the alien crew worked in silence, checking screens and securing the cargo. None of them gave him more than a passing glance through the small window at his side. Tom saw the stars slowly shifting. A faint silver glow appeared in the distance, growing larger with each passing minute. Soon, he could see the shape of a lonely planet covered in ice and clouds. Orbiting above it was a shape so massive it seemed unreal. The Sentinel, even from this far away. The warship's size was breathtaking. Its long central body stretched like the spine of some ancient sea creature, with 4 giant arms reaching outward. The arms ended in heavy weapon platforms, each the size of a small city. Much of the hull was dark, covered in layers of ice and dust from centuries of drifting. Still, it looked powerful. Tom's chest tightened. He had dreamed of seeing this ship ever since hearing about it from the alien guards. Now it was real, right in front of him. He had the strange feeling that it was watching him, even though it was lifeless. The shuttle made a slow approach toward a large docking ring on one of the ship's arms. The aliens spoke quietly in their own language, preparing for landing. Tom listened but caught only a few words: cargo, hold, and safe. They were not talking about the ship as a threat. They thought it was harmless. The docking was smooth. A faint vibration passed through the shuttle as it connected to the docking ring. The ramp opened, and cold air rushed in. The crew began unloading crates, their footsteps echoing in the silent metal chamber. The walls here were old and marked with strange symbols. Tom picked up a crate and followed two other technicians into the warship's cargo bay. The floor was covered in a thin layer of frost. The air was so cold it bit at his skin even through the uniform. Every sound echoed sharply. As if the walls were listening, he glanced around, memorizing every detail. The cargo bay was huge and mostly empty, except for the stacked crates. At the far end, a large door stood half open, leading deeper into the ship. Beyond it, the passageway was dark. No alien guards stood there. They were only interested in unloading supplies. Tom's plan was simple. When the others were busy, he would slip away into the dark hallway and explore. He waited for the right moment. Two aliens began arguing over a damaged container, their voices rising. Others gathered around to watch. Tom quietly set his crate down and walked toward the half-open door. No one stopped him. The hallway beyond was colder still. The floor was covered in a thin mist, and the walls glimmered faintly with frost. He moved carefully, the sound of his boots soft on the metal. The lights here were dead, but faint blue glows came from strange lines running along the walls. Tom felt an odd pressure in the air, almost like the weight of a storm before it breaks. He had the strange sense that the ship was not completely asleep, that it was aware of his presence. After a few turns, he reached a circular chamber. In its center stood a tall column covered in symbols. The style was unlike any alien writing he had seen on the cruiser. It looked older, more graceful, almost like flowing rivers carved into stone. At the base of the column was a small panel, dusted with frost. Tom crouched beside it. The panel was just the right height for a human. He brushed away the frost and found a hand-shaped imprint. In the metal, his heart pounded. It was not a guess anymore. The ship had been made for human hands. Slowly, he placed his palm in the imprint. Nothing happened at first. Then a soft vibration passed through the floor. A faint light spread from the panel, running along the walls like water flowing through channels. The blue lines brightened, and a low hum began in the distance. Tom pulled his hand back, breathing quickly. He had just awakened something. A voice spoke not in the alien language, not even in the modern human tongue, but in a deep, ancient form of Earth's speech. The words were old, but Tom understood them. Command presence detected, awaiting instructions. Tom stared at the column, stunned. He whispered, "You understand me." Confirmed. The voice replied calmly, "Designated commander, human genetic signature verified. Systems offline. Primary power reserves minimal. Recommend activation protocol." Tom stood there in silence, the hum of the ship surrounding him. He had expected to find an old, dead relic. Instead, he had found a ship that knew him. Before he could speak again, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. Alien voices shouted from the distance. They had noticed someone missing. Tom took one last look at the glowing column. He whispered, "I'll come back," then turned and moved quickly down the nearest side passage. He found himself in a narrow maintenance tunnel, just high enough to crouch in. Pipes and cables lined the walls, some humming faintly now that the ship was stirring. He followed the tunnel until it opened into a small storage room. There, he hid behind a stack of old containers as the alien voices grew louder, then passed by. When it was quiet again, Tom sat in the darkness, his mind racing. The Sentinel had recognized him as a commander. That meant it could still function, but it was too weak to move or fight in its current state. He would need to return, and he would need to bring it fully online. The question was how. He knew the alien crew would soon leave the ship, thinking they had only completed another routine supply drop. That gave him time. The storage planet was remote. If he could remain hidden aboard the Sentinel, he might explore it further once the aliens were gone. But it was risky. If they discovered him before leaving, he would be captured again, or worse still. The choice felt clear. The old stories had been right. The builders had left a gift for humanity. Hidden in plain sight, the aliens thought it was dead. Only Tom knew it was alive and waiting. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. The cold air filled his lungs, sharp and clean, somewhere deep in the ship. He could still hear the hum. Faint but steady died. It was the sound of a giant waking from a long sleep. Tom's heart beat hard in the cold silence of the storage room. The sentinel had spoken to him, recognizing his hand, his voice, his very presence. But now, the danger was real. Alien voices echoed down the corridor, growing louder as the search for him intensified. He could not stay hidden forever. He pressed his back against the cold metal wall and listened carefully. The aliens moved with purpose, their footsteps rang sharply, and their voices grew closer. Tom took a deep breath and forced himself to stay calm. Panic would not help him now. He had seen a narrow service hatch near the far corner of the room. It was just large enough for a person to crawl through. Quietly, Tom moved toward it, careful not to knock anything over. The metal hatch was cold and rough under his fingertips. He found a small latch and pulled it open. The tunnel beyond was tight and dark. He slipped inside and closed the hatch behind him. The passage was low, forcing him to crouch. Pipes and wires ran along the ceiling and walls, some humming faintly with the ship's faint power. The air was chilly but cleaner here. Tom moved slowly, steadying his breathing, listening for sounds from above. He crawled for several meters until the tunnel ended at a grated floor. Peeking through, he could see the lower level of the ship's inner workings, machinery and glowing control panels filled the space. The hum of power was stronger here. Tom's mind raced. He knew he had to get to the ship's main control center. That was where he could unlock more systems and maybe take full command. But first, he needed to find a way to move unseen through the ship. As he crawled forward, his hand brushed against a small device lying on the floor. It was an alien scanner, probably dropped by one of the technicians during the supply run. Tom picked it up, curious. The screen showed strange symbols, but it also displayed a map of the ship's lower levels. He tapped the screen and found a route marked in blue. It led to the central command deck. This was his chance. Moving carefully, Tom followed the path shown on the device. He crawled through several tunnels, passing stacks of crates and rows of silent machines. Occasionally, he stopped to listen. The alien search teams were still looking, but their footsteps had faded into the distance. After what felt like an hour, Tom reached a large hatch with a keypad beside it. He tried the key card he had taken from the guard. The panel flashed green, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a dimly lit corridor. The walls were lined with panels of glowing buttons and screens. The air smelled faintly of ozone. Tom stepped inside, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. This was the command deck of the Sentinel. He walked forward, scanning the controls. Most of the screens were dark or filled with static. The ship's power was low, and many systems were offline. But there was hope. A large panel in the center of the room showed the ship's status. Tom approached it and saw the words primary, power offline flashing in red. He reached out and pressed a button marked activate. Nothing happened at first. Then, slowly, the hum of energy grew louder. Lights flickered on along the walls. Screens displayed information in a language that looked strange but also familiar. Tom's mind struggled to understand, but he recognized some symbols, ones from old human star charts he had seen as a child. Suddenly, the ship shuddered. Tom grabbed a railing to steady himself. The energy flow was returning. He moved to another panel labeled weapons. The controls were frozen, but the labels showed enormous firepower. Tom felt a surge of pride. This ship, lost for centuries, still held power beyond the wildest dreams of the alien empire. A soft voice spoke again, the same deep ancient tone. Commander, power reserves at 20%. Systems waking. Tom smiled and whispered, "We are just getting started." But his thoughts quickly returned to the present danger. The aliens were still on the ship, and they would soon realize he had taken control. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the command deck. Red lights flashed. Tom's heart jumped. He had triggered a security alert through the ship's speakers. The harsh voice of an alien officer barked commands in their language. Tom did not understand the words but felt their anger. He had to act fast. He ran to a console labeled Defense Systems and typed in commands as best as he could guess. The screens came alive, showing schematics of the ship's weapon turrets and shield generators. The weapons were offline, but the shields were still weakly active. Tom tapped a button to raise the shield power. Slowly, a faint blue glow surrounded the ship's hull, like a protective bubble, from the windows of the command deck. Tom could see the alien cruisers returning. They had realized he was aboard the Sentinel. Their smaller ships moved to intercept. Tom's mind raced. The ship was not yet ready for battle, but it had power. If he could unlock the full systems, maybe he could fight back. He pressed another button, trying to access the ship's navigation controls. The screen showed a complex star map with blinking points of light. One point was marked as homeworld of Drelvis. A plan formed in Tom's mind. If he could fire the ship's weapons, he could strike at the heart of the alien empire. It would show the galaxy that humans were not to be taken lightly. The alarms continued to ring. But Tom's calm grew. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a commander in command of one of the greatest warships the galaxy had ever known. The battle was just beginning. The hum of the Sentinel grew stronger every second. Tom stood at the main console, eyes fixed on the glowing screens that showed the slow return of the warship's systems. The ancient ship was waking from a long sleep. It had waited for centuries. And now, it was coming alive again. The walls around him pulsed softly with light, as if the ship itself was breathing. Tom felt a deep connection to the machine. He was no longer just a prisoner or a visitor. He was the commander the ship had waited for. The voice returned, calm and steady. Commander, auxiliary power is stabilizing. Weapon systems offline pending. Authorization. Navigation controls operational, but limited. Awaiting full system activation key. Tom pressed his fingers to the panel, searching for any clue to unlock the final controls. He remembered the stories from Earth ancient legends about a hidden command key, encoded deep within human genetics. Could that be true? He closed his eyes and focused. He spoke softly, the words flowing from his lips as if from memory long forgotten. Unlock, activate, engage. The ship's lights flickered, and suddenly the screens displayed a new message. Command key accepted. Full systems powering up. Tom opened his eyes in surprise. The voice spoke again, with a hint of approval. Welcome back, Commander. The main display lit up with new information. The Sentinel's weapons were coming online. The huge turrets along the ship's arms began to spin into position, their barrels glowing faintly with power. Shields brightened, shimmering with energy ready to protect the vessel. Tom walked to a window and looked out. The stars stretched endlessly beyond. In the distance, smaller alien cruisers had surrounded the Sentinel. They had come to reclaim the ship, but now they were in the range of its massive firepower. His mind raced. The Drelvis believed this ancient weapon was useless. They thought the human prisoner was powerless. They had waited centuries, not knowing the storm about to strike. Tom reached for a control panel labeled Targeting. He selected the nearest enemy cruiser. The screen showed a detailed image of the alien ship's weak points. He paused. This was no time for mercy. His people had been hunted and captured, treated like animals. The galaxy needed to see that humans were not weak. A moment later, a beam of blue energy burst from the Sentinel. It struck the alien cruiser with the force of 1,000 explosions. The enemy ship shuddered and began to break apart. The other cruisers opened fire, their weapons lighting up the darkness. But the Sentinel's shields held strong. Tom moved quickly, activating countermeasures and adjusting the ship's position. The battle had begun. As the warship fired again, Tom's thoughts drifted to Earth. He wondered if anyone knew he was alive. He wondered if the stories of the Sentinel would one day inspire others. The voice of the ship interrupted his thoughts. Commander, power reserves at 50%. Weapons operating at optimal efficiency. Tom nodded. This was just the start. The Drelvis fleet was powerful, but the Sentinel was stronger, more advanced, and it had a commander who would not give up. He reached for the navigation controls. The star map appeared, showing the path back to the Drelvis homeworld. A plan took shape in his mind. he would use the ship's weapons to strike at their heart. He would end this war before it could grow worse. The aliens fired again. But the Sentinel responded with precision. Beams of energy cut through their ships, one by one. The space around him filled with light and noise, but Tom stayed calm. He felt the ship's power flowing through him, as if they were one. The ancient technology recognized him, and he guided it like a conductor leading a great orchestra, after what felt like ours. The enemy fleet began to retreat. Their ships limped away, damaged and broken. Tom watched until there were only tiny points of light in the distance. The Sentinel was victorious. But Tom knew this was not the end. The war was far from over. The Drelvas would come back, stronger and more determined. He would have to be ready. He turned to the ship's systems and began planning repairs and upgrades. The Sentinel had been asleep for centuries, and much of its power was still locked away. He would need time and resources to unlock its full potential. For now, he found a quiet chamber and sat down. His body ached from the tension of the battle, but his mind was alive with hope. He whispered to the empty room, "This is only the beginning." The ship's lights dimmed slightly, settling into a steady glow. The Sentinel had awakened, and so had the human who commanded it. After the battle with the Drelva's fleet, the Sentinel drifted silently in the cold space above the storage planet. Tom stood at the command deck window, watching the stars. The ship was powerful, but it needed time. Repairs had begun. The ancient systems were waking slowly, one by one. Some parts of the ship were old and broken, but many others responded to Tom's commands with surprising speed. The ship's AI, once silent for centuries, now spoke softly, offering advice and information. Tom spent hours each day learning the ship's secrets. He found old star maps, weapon designs, and logs of past battles. The Sentinel had been a guardian, built to protect humanity and its allies in ancient times. It had waited, hidden, waiting for a day when humans would need it again. The Drelvas did not know this. They thought the Sentinel was useless scrap. That was their mistake. Tom knew that a new war was coming. The Drelva's empire was growing stronger, and they would return with more ships and weapons. He had to be ready, but time was not on his side. Earth was far away, and no help would come soon. He had to make the Sentinel strong enough to face the enemy alone. Days turned into weeks. Tom worked with the ship's systems, repairing power cores, activating hidden weapon banks, and restoring shield generators. The ship's hum grew louder, the lights brighter. The giant warship was coming back to life. Yet, the longer he waited, the more he learned about the price of power. The Sentinel's weapons were unlike anything in the modern galaxy. Their energy demands were enormous. Firing even one weapon drained a large part of the ship's reserves. Tom had to manage the power carefully. He studied old battle strategies, recorded in the ship's memory. The ancient commanders had waited for the right moment before striking. They understood patience was a weapon itself. Tom followed their example. He waited. One evening, as the distant sun set behind the ice-covered planet, the ship's sensors picked up movement. Small ships approached from the dark. Drelva scouts. Tom stood ready. The shields glowed bright as the scouts came closer. The Drelva ships fired, but the Sentinel's defenses held firm. The ancient warship responded with controlled bursts of energy. One scout exploded in a flash of light. Others fled. It was a warning. Tom sent a message across the stars, a signal only the Drelvas could hear. It said one thing: the Sentinel was awake. Weeks passed with no major attacks. Tom used the time to prepare. He repaired the last weapon systems and tested the ship's engines. The Sentinel could move again, though slowly. It was still not at full strength. Then one day, a message arrived. A small human ship had received Tom's signal. A pilot named Mira was on her way with supplies and news. Tom felt hope stir inside him. Maybe he was not alone after all. Mira arrived in a sleek ship, landing carefully on the Sentinel's deck. She stepped out, her eyes wide with wonder at the giant warship. "We heard your signal," she said. "Earth and its allies are preparing. We will come for you." Tom smiled, relief washing over him. The wait was almost over, but there was one last thing. The Sentinel's great weapon, the core cannon. Remain offline. It was the most powerful weapon on the ship, capable of destroying entire fleets. Tom stood at the control panel, studying the schematics. The core cannon required an ancient energy source, hidden deep within the ship's bowels. Finding it would be dangerous, he looked at Mira. Are you ready for what comes next? She nodded. Let's finish this. The long wait was ending. The warship was ready to fire. The cold air of the warship's core chamber hung heavy as Tom and Mira stood side by side. The room was massive, filled with towering energy conduits and ancient machinery that had not been touched for centuries. Dim blue light flowed through the cables like rivers of liquid light. At the center stood the core power unit. It was shaped like a crystal sphere, suspended between three curved arms of metal. Faint pulses of light shimmered inside it, like the heartbeat of a giant. This is it, Tom said quietly, the heart of the Sentinel. Mira looked around in awe. It feels alive. It is, Tom replied. It has been waiting for someone to wake it fully. The ship's AI spoke, its voice deep and steady. Commander, to activate the core cannon, the primary crystal must be awakened. This will require direct command link from the human commander. Tom stepped forward, placing his palm on the smooth surface of the control console. A thin beam of light scanned his hand, then his face. Command link confirmed, the AI said. Initiating core awakening sequence. The chamber trembled as deep machinery roared to life. Energy surged through the conduits. The blue light grew brighter, flooding the room. The crystal sphere flared with white light, sending waves of heat across the chamber. Tom could feel it, an ancient power returning after centuries of silence. In the command deck above, warning lights flashed. The Sentinel's great weapon was charging. Mira's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her excitement. Once it's charged, how powerful is it? Tom glanced at her. Powerful enough to end this war in one shot. The AI interrupted. Commander, enemy fleet detected entering range. 37 vessels, including 3 capital ships. Tom and Mira exchanged a quick look. The Drelvas were here. They had come with everything they had to destroy the Sentinel before it could awaken fully. Core charge at 20%. The AI reported. Tom and Mira ran to the command deck. Through the large forward windows, the blackness of space glimmered with the shapes of enemy ships moving in formation. Their weapons were already charging. Shields to full, Tom ordered. Bring all secondary weapons online. The Sentinel's side turrets roared to life, firing bright lances of energy at the incoming enemy fleet. Smaller Drelva ships exploded instantly, but the larger ones pressed forward, their shields glowing under the impacts. Core charge at 40%, the AI announced. The enemy returned fire. The Sentinel shook under the barrage. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the console overloaded. Mira worked quickly, rerouting power to maintain the shields. Hold together. Tom muttered to the ship. The AI's voice remained calm. Core charge at 60%. Recommend holding defensive position. Tom gritted his teeth. The enemy fleet was closing in. The Sentinel's secondary weapons were powerful, but not enough to stop them all. The core cannon had to fire soon or they would be overwhelmed. 80%, the AI said. An enemy capital ship moved into position, its massive forward cannon glowing with energy. Mira pointed to it. That one will fire soon. If it hits the core chamber, Tom cut her off. It won't. 90%, the AI reported. The capital ship fired. A beam of red energy shot toward the Sentinel. Tom braced for impact, but at the last second, Mira diverted maximum shield power to the front. The beam slammed into the shields, bending them inward but not breaking through. The lights dimmed across the command deck. Systems struggled to recover. Core charge complete, the AI said. Weapon ready. Tom felt a rush of adrenaline. Target the lead capital ship. Target locked, the AI replied. Fire. The deck shook violently as the core cannon released its energy. A massive beam of pure white light erupted from the Sentinel's forward array, cutting across the darkness like a sword of the stars. It struck the enemy capital ship dead center. For a brief moment, everything was silent. Then the Drelva ship shattered into 1,000 burning fragments. The shockwave rippled outward, slamming into nearby vessels and tearing them apart. In a single shot, half the enemy fleet was gone. The surviving ships faltered. Some tried to fight back, but most turned and fled, their formations breaking apart. In panic, Tom exhaled slowly. Reload the core cannon. Recharge cycle begun, the AI said. Full charge in 20 minutes. The Sentinel's secondary weapons continued to fire, chasing down the retreating ships. One by one, they vanished into the darkness, leaving only wreckage behind. When it was over, silence returned to the command deck. The stars shone bright against the black, and the debris of the battle drifted slowly past the windows. Mira leaned against the console, breathing hard. We did it. Tom looked out at the battlefield. No, we showed them what we can do. But the war isn't over yet. He turned to the AI. Begin long-range scans. I want to know where the rest of their fleets are hiding. Understood, Commander, the AI replied. Tom walked to the window again. The Sentinel had waited centuries to fire its weapon. Today, it had spoken with the voice of thunder. The galaxy now knew that humans still had power. But Tom also knew that power alone was not enough. He needed allies, strategy, and time still. For the first time since his capture, he felt true hope. The Sentinel was his, and with it, he could change the fate of his people. The Drelvis had thought the human was just a prisoner. They had been wrong. The warship had waited for him for centuries, and now it was awake, and it would not sleep again.